Greetings Earthlings, this is Winston the Homicidal Computer, and you are listening to an excerpt from Cinephobia Radio. For the complete episode, visit the website at www.cinephobia-radio.com. So slooshy well my delicate delinquents. Slooshy well.
It is something that is worth the attempt, no matter what happens. And this is a purely objective. You know, you mentioned my family, and I didn't even tell. My husband, of course, knows, and he helped me make the flight reservations, and he's helped. He bought me a poncho the other day, and, you know, he's been helping me get prepared here. But I didn't tell my kids. I have 4 children, and I didn't even tell them because I knew they wouldn't take it well. And then I haven't told my of course not my grandchildren. The reason is I kind of want to save my grandchildren from knowing they're at the age where they still have all their lives ahead of them. And I hate to do this to a kid, is tell them about the reality we're living in right now when they're 6 and 10 and 16 years old. You hate to tell somebody, look what you're up against. You know, it's that bad. So you try to save them from this. I might know I'm talking too much, but it reminds me of that movie Beautiful Life, where they're in the concentration camp and the father is trying to keep his son from knowing they're in a concentration camp. And he was in somewhat successfully, and by the end of the movie.
Wonderful. 2 thumbs up, says Siskel and Ebert. A modern comic masterpiece, raves the Chicago Tribune. Written, directed by, and starring Italy's national treasure, Roberto Benigni. In the story that proves love, family, and imagination conquer all. Life is beautiful.
So it's a really good movie in that sense, but you know, you hate to do this. I've scared not only my own children, because I knew a lot about serial killers and kidnap victims. I actually, you know, I ended up interviewing kidnap victims, even a couple times little kids. And I interviewed, of course, I'm trying to think if I ever interviewed a serial killer. I don't know if I have, but I took a lot of training on it.
That expires in 1 week. You're not real FBI, are you?
I'm still in training at the academy.
Jack Crawford sent a trainee to me.
Yes, I'm a student. I'm here to learn from you. Maybe you can decide for yourself whether or not I'm qualified enough to do that.
That is rather slippery of you, Agents Darling. Sit, please.
And so the world is full. The world is full of potential kidnappers. And yeah, in some ways you have to kind of scare your kids. You have to say, don't talk. If someone wants to give you candy, don't go up to the car. You know, you have to do this. But on the other hand, you hate to say how bad is the world when you're telling people that they can't even talk to a stranger or can't smile back or whatever. And I know in my family, everybody thought I was too cruel that way, because I would kind of now when we're going to this place, you stay close to me because there might be a serial killer.
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing. You're educated in these things. But this was the whole point of the unsanitized children's fairy tales, was cautionary tales to instruct children that the world is a malignant place, which is a very difficult thing for a young child to understand, especially if they're protected by loving parents who kind of keep them nice and safe. I think at a certain point in adolescence, because there's a certain organic thing that creeps into somebody's developing psyche in adolescence where they become morbidly aware of their mortality and may go into a depression and become a goth or whatever they do. That's the point where you want to be ready and willing to accept some of the harsh realities of life. And I think people who somehow missed the boat on that and then go into their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and even 60s, believing in the fundamental integrity of the media, the government, and all the fairy tales that are perpetuated in order to present this illusion of a democracy and so on and so forth, it becomes very, very difficult for those individuals to then retroactively apply any kind of insight and earth-shattering epiphanies, because it indicts their entire life, all their identities. And we saw this a lot, actually, with the corona panic in 2020. A lot of the pundits, a lot of the dissidents, like the Robert Malones, the Byron Bridles, and so on and so forth. Prior to 2020, or Pierre Corey, I saw him talk about this very emotionally. Prior to 2020, these guys believed in the media. Pierre Corey was a card-carrying Democrat and in fact believed every word of the New York Times.
Prior to COVID, I had a general implicit faith and trust in the institutions of society. Brett, I'm sure you were much more worldly than I was before COVID in terms of what the media, the narratives and the propaganda in the media. But I believed in the New York Times. I believed in the high impact journals. I thought the best science and scientists published there. If you got published in New England Journal of Medicine, that was that's like the pinnacle of your career.
So for individuals like this, the corona panic opened their eyes to just how corrupted their profession and the medical establishment is. And a lot of them actually think this is a recent phenomenon, but slowly and surely they're retroactively applying this insight throughout their entire careers. And it's very distressing for these individuals. You watch Dr. Campbell because we talk about it, and we're watching this guy in real time having this very interesting breakdown, and he's starting to he's destabilized. He doesn't know what to believe anymore. And it also leaves them vulnerable, by the way, to competing narratives that are also manufactured. The Klaus Schwab runs the world group, because it's another explanation. It's okay, I don't believe in the media now. I know that's a lie, but this competing narrative has come along, and that makes sense to me, so I'm just going to go full on into that one.
But the idea that there was an organised departments of government that increased fear to increase our sympathetic activity, to deliberately reduce our rationality, is really quite perturbing. And everyone watching Ros knows I get anxious sometimes, and I hate the feeling, of course. But the worst thing about it is it robs you of your rationality.
Yes.
You can't think straight. Normally I'll say, okay, we've got a particular situation here. Let's look at the airway. Let's look at the breathing. Let's look at the circulation, or whatever it is. That's in a first aid situation, as long as there's no catastrophic hemorrhage initially. You have a rational way that you work through these things, and the anxiety just robs you of that, and it's just horrible that this happens, and it really is. I think it does attest to the potential power that governments have, and should act as a warning of potential dystopian situations for the future, because these powers are real. This psychological manipulation, which I would call it, you might euphemize it to a nudge. These things are real, and we're all susceptible to it. We are susceptible to advertising. We most of us are average drivers. We're not above average drivers as we think, because by definition there's got to be an average. People have this unrealistic appraisal of themselves, and I am prone to external environmental stimulation and other people and authority massively. I would say a lot less than I was before the start of this pandemic.
Yep, that's exactly right. And it's all about people who can't. It's that movie with Nicholson where he says, "You can't handle the truth."
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
And that rings true to me. People don't, that when truth is really bad news, I'll just tell you an example, and this is a very light example. One of my very first assignments in the FBI, there was like a fraud, a major fraud that was nationwide, where some guy was selling silver mines or something in Colorado or Arizona or something, but the mines didn't even exist. But he had duped a lot of wealthy businessmen throughout the United States. And I had to go to some of these. In fact, it was a company that was their CEO and whatever of this company in Omaha. And I walked in the office and I said, FBI, I was only 27 years old. And I walked in, showed him my credentials, and I said, well, I'm here to see if, the amount of money you invested in the silver mine, blah, 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 give me your documentation, because we have found out that this is a fraud and there is no silver mine. And they looked at me and practically kicked me out of their office. And they could not believe that I was telling them the truth. Oh, why? Because he lost a lot of money. I mean, and it was the first thing like, well, when the truth is bad, people will naturally just basically put their hands over their ears. When we got into right around after the Iraq War, we had different peace activism here in Minnesota. And one lady started up a group, and she was really good. She was lobbying. Her group was trying to lobby the elected congresspersons about the truth of Iraq, etc. She was fine. But she didn't really read or pay a lot of attention to developing reports and news reports about stuff. So when I would get together with her, I would try to update her on what was actually going on, to help her cause in terms of lobbying. And the last couple of times I tried to say, well, this is happening, and now they're going to do this, and blah, blah, blah. She basically physically put her hands over her ears and said, Colleen, stop talking. You're taking away my hope. And so this notion that if you know the truth, it takes away your hope, and you have to cling to a false hope in order to be able to survive, essentially to survive and carry on. Now, I think you can know reality. I have a hard time understanding being that emotionally vulnerable that you, like Nicholson says in the movie, you people can't handle the truth. I have a hard time understanding that. I think it's possible to know an ugly, horrible truth of some things, and especially now, of course, with the genocide. You have to know what's going on. I mean, this is the horror of it is terrible. And if you think you can just put your hands over your ears and say, oh, it can't be that bad, because I can't deal with it. I can't personally handle knowing killing babies and children, and wantonly like that. And then having people dance around in joy afterwards after they've killed, assassinated and killed. I can't know that human beings are this bad, because it's going to, quote unquote, take away my hope. And so I think that emotionally, psychology does explain a lot of how we react to things. Mm-hmm. And it does take, I think there are people now those manipulators on top, less than 1% of people are psychopathically endowed like that. They do know the truth. They don't have any problem in handling the truth because they are psychopaths, and it doesn't affect them too much. So they can know things and know, the truth. It doesn't hurt their feelings at all. And so that little less than 1%. And then this other block of people, large block of at least 2/3, 70%, maybe even higher, they fall for nice lies. They fall for the emotional manipulation because it makes them feel better. And they don't want it. A lot of times they actually don't even want to know the truth, at least initially, at least at the start of something. They don't want to know. But I think, I've said this to you before, I think there are people, and I'm going to put you in the club right away. I think there are people in a club, I call it the WTF club, that can understand, as bad as reality is, and still be able to continue to try our hardest. And again, we're not foolish, but you have to try. And I think that the only way that I can see this is knowing the truth. If I didn't know the truth, I wouldn't try very hard.
Well, I'm going to say something about this that I've been thinking about more. First of all, I like this WTF club. I think we should get like motorcycle jackets with like skull and crossbones on the back with the W. I'm going to get one, so you can get one if you want. But here's the thing, and this is an interesting thing, and it's kind of been bubbling to the surface of my mind over the last few weeks, is that I understand perfectly well why people are terrified about the truth because of how threatening it is to all of their assumptions. But if you can get past it, and if you can detach and go through the requisite psychosis that is engendered by doing that, because it is psychosis, when you no longer have when you no longer have anchor points and a firm basis of belief in any of the fundamentals that sustain your perception of the world, when you can get past it, you pass into this wonderful zone where you see things more clearly and you realize there's much, much more hope than you've been genetically programmed and media programmed to believe most of your lives. For instance, what you're doing, this act of activism, this kind of thing is mocked in the corporate media, not just on the news, but within the culture. Sitcoms, movies. If you're watching like an American sitcom and there's a young idealist person who believes in like social activism or doing any kind of activist causes, they're mocked in the media. They're ridiculed. And the reason for this is anathema to the control mechanisms of the corporate state. If people start thinking that they can exert some effort and influence on them and push back, they don't want that. So they try to delegitimize the very concept. That's why any kind of collectivism is associated with totalitarianism in the culture, because the antidote to oligarchical rule is collective action, especially solidarity with workers and so on and so forth.
Let me tell you something, Mr. Bunker.
No, let me tell you something, Mr. Stivic. You are a meathead.
What did you call me?
A meathead. Dead from the neck up. Meathead.
Oh, yeah, now I see what your idea of a free country is. You're free to say anything you want, but if anyone disagrees with you, they're either thrown into jail or called a meathead, right?
That's right, because this is America, land that I love.
Well, I love it too, Mr. Bunker, and it's because I do it. I protest when I think things are wrong.
Then stand beside her. And guide her.
The right to dissent is the principle upon which this country was based.
With the light from above.
Listen to me. It's in the Bill of Rights.
From the mountains.
Why do you think we broke away from England to begin with, huh? Because we didn't agree with her. We demanded freedom.
Would fall.
Gee, it's guys like you who don't listen to reason. I mean, you're not listening to anything. You're totally closed-minded. You're prejudice! You're prejudice! You're prejudice! Not anymore. I'm leaving. You're prejudice!
Get away from me! My home, sweet home.
So once you detach yourself from the programming and the indoctrination, you start to realize we're more powerful than we think we are. Exactly what Orwell wrote about in 1984, that if the proles just could recognize their own strength, they would shake off the party like a horse shaking off flies.
If there is hope, wrote Winston, it lies in the proles. If only they could somehow become conscious of their own strength. They needed only to rise up and shake themselves like a horse shaking off flies. If they chose, they could blow the party to pieces tomorrow morning. Surely sooner or later it must occur to them to do it.
And that's what you're doing, and that's the dangerous thing about what you're doing, is because you're going over there with aid, in defiance of all of this stuff, and you're bringing hope to people. Now, hopefully you get there, and the aid is delivered, and the people get the much-needed aid that they have. But beyond that, these are people who have felt abandoned by the world and to see that Americans and activists are willing to make this treacherous journey to their shores in solidarity with their suffering, that's going to do incredible things to their spirits, but then also to people watching this from around the world. They're going to be inspired to do something more than just go through the machinations. And I'm just going to say one last thing. It's not necessary to wake people up. I'm convinced that most people are just genetically programmed to follow the tribe. Maybe in some extreme cases, one of them may kind of shatter out of their illusions. It's much more important to inspire those who are already at the precipice of enlightenment or have passed that threshold and are in this kind of mode of maybe feeling despaired and maybe feeling defeated. Because I know people like this. They know that the media is lying. They know that indoctrination exists and so on. But yet they feel hopeless and they feel they can't do anything. But you can do things. You can very much do things, because a lot of these middle managers who kind of guardian the ruling degenerates from our collective action, they're worms and they're weasels and they have no backbone. And as soon as they feel our collective pressure, they go running for the hills.
This is Winston the Homicidal Computer. I hope you enjoyed this excerpt of Cinephobia Radio. For the complete episode, visit the website at www.cinephobia-radio.com. So until next time, vidi well my little droogies, vidi well.